looking at it and we started talking about it. I think the general impression kind of last year was that corporate America hadn't done a lot to push back against the tariffs, right? I mean, companies had talked about it on their earnings calls and said it was going to be a cost, but in terms of
we're very careful about coming out publicly and saying, this is not good.
Exactly. And some of the large public companies still are very careful. Costco is really the exception. And Zoe's not going to toot her own horn. So I'm going to toot her horn for her and that of our other colleague, Jaewon Kang. But they broke the news. They were the first ones to report that Costco was filing a lawsuit. I've then spoken to some companies who said they decided to file a lawsuit because they saw that Costco is doing it. So this does have a bit of a snowball effect. How do we get from several companies filing in November to nearly 1,000? It's because they say, oh, Costco is doing this. Actually, that means that maybe this is a good legal strategy. So you had a lot of, as we said in the story, you had a lot of companies jumping on the bandwagon.
But Jeanette, are there risks to doing this? Because you're going and, you're speaking out against an administration that has shown that it is willing to be punitive when it comes to opposition.
Yeah, I think that is some of the companies that we spoke with did say that they were worried about that. Yeah. And that's why I think the number that we were the first to report is so important, because there is safety in numbers, right? If you're one of 10 companies filing, right, then you could be singled out. Whereas these companies that we spoke with, I spoke with a really a smaller bicycle company in California. It's like, okay, yeah, we see that all of these companies are filing and there is some safety in numbers. So I think that's part of the strategy here.
But it's not like the S&P 500 has come out en masse.
No.
And said, let's go after it. Hey, Zoe, come on back in here. If the Supreme Court declares the tariffs unlawful, then what?
Great question. Everyone wants to know the answer to that question. The first thing we'll be looking for in the opinion is what the justices themselves have to say about what's next, whether they address the question of refunds, who's eligible, whether they kick it back to the lower courts and say, you figure out this mess. There's some precedent for the U.S. Trade Court dealing with a mass refund situation, but even then it involves something like 4,000 claimants. And here we know from court papers, the government has said there are at least 300,000 importers that have paid these contested tariffs as of mid-December. So the scale and scope of a refund process would be massive.
Could they possibly, from a legal basis, say, all right, this wasn't lawful, but we also understand it's messy to clean up. And so from this day forward, you can't do this, Mr. President. Could that happen? Could that even legally happen?
There was a little discussion of that during arguments, but not a whole lot of digging into the really practical remedy questions that the rest of the world economy wants to know the answer to. The arguments were very focused on the questions of law, not the questions of reality and what happens next. So it is possible, it's on the table, this idea that they could order only forward-facing relief, but that would leave some 300,000 companies and counting very upset.
Yeah, no, I get that.
I want to let Zoe Tillman go. She's part of the team behind this, but we're going to keep Jeanette Newman here, who covers the consumer and works on this. Well, go ahead.
I just want to ask, in a follow-up to that, would companies be okay with that? What are you hearing in terms of the reporting? Do they just want to win and they want the money back? Or would they be like, okay, kind of not great for what happened, but at least we can move forward and know we don't have to deal with this?
I think it's probably both. And I think depending on the company, but again, as we said, because a lot of the companies are small and medium-sized companies that have filed and that's the thing. It's like, okay, we haven't seen this massive impact from the tariffs yet, but talking to these companies for this story, what I really learned was that, okay, they've made it through so far, but they really need these refunds if the case is overturned. And if the tariffs are upheld and they don't get the refunds, then this next year and the following year are going to be, that's when we're going to start to see the real financial and economic impact of the tariffs.
I want to go back to what you said about talking to some of the leaders of these companies, especially the smaller ones. You mentioned the bicycle company out of Northern California, Ibis Cycles. Yeah. A great bike. The Ibis Haka.
Okay, I was going to say, you're a cyclist,
Mojo.
right?
He is.
I actually had an
Do you
Ibis.
have one?
I bought an Ibis Mojo in 2006.
I had no idea, by the way. This was not planned.
It's a great like independent bike company.
Yeah.
But you said in the piece that the company paid $800,000 in tariffs by 2025. I just want to remind everybody, the president likes to say it's the other countries that are paying these tariffs. When you speak to these business owners, are they saying that other countries are paying these tariffs? Or are they saying that?
No, and they are incredibly frustrated that people continue to believe that. And for example, with Ibis Cycles, part of the issue is too, okay, so $800,000 in additional costs. And then they have additional duties that they're already paying right before Trump's new tariff. So they're paying a lot in terms of duties and tariffs. And they think that if they raise their prices, that demand would really plummet. So it's not like everyone can just raise prices by, a couple dollars to compensate for these increased costs. So that's why this next year, I think, will be a real turning point in terms of the tariff costs.
Yeah, that's the reality, right? The longer this goes on, there are smaller businesses who are just, you can be pinched for so long before it becomes financially a problem, right? In a big way.
But are these companies, the whole point of these tariffs are to provide an incentive for companies to make their products in the United States. Let's go with some of the companies that you spoke to. Are they able to move their production to the US and stop importing to avoid these tariffs?
Not that quickly. And even, for example, just to go back to Ibis, they have a manufacturing facility in the US, but they're still getting hammered. And so if they would want to, for example, I'm making this up, but if they would want to expand their manufacturing capabilities in the US, how are they going to do that if they don't have the extra money to invest because they're spending so much in terms of paying for the tariff? So I think they're just really between a rock and a hard place. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would imagine for a lot of these companies, I mean, you're dealing with an administration that I think it's safe to say that you don't want to be on the White House's radar, especially if you're being critical of strategy coming out of the administration. And so for smaller businesses, it just kind of speaks to how much they are feeling squeezed at this point, right? That they feel like, I kind of need to do this.
They are feeling squeezed. But like we were talking about earlier, I think with the safety and numbers issue, now that they're, for example, the guy at Ibis Cycles said, people saw his name in the article and they reached out to him and said, oh, maybe we should actually join the suit. And so, so smaller companies, and they also have the benefit of not being as big so as to maybe seem as politically important. So I think there's a benefit there that I think that they can start to reap more now that there's more companies that are filing, right? The safety and numbers.
I have one last question. Was there anything like geographically clumped together? Was there any kind of nuances in terms of the companies that were filing?
We saw the greatest number of companies in California and New York. Those are obviously population centers. There could be a political read on that, but we just didn't talk to like a high enough percentage of the companies to be able to draw any conclusions. Yeah. There's obviously a lot of manufacturing and importing in both of those states as well. But it was New York and California.
Lots of people starting small businesses, certainly in both of those states. Yeah. Great stuff. Incredible reporting. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Of course, joining us was Jeanette Newman. She is Bloomberg News consumer reporter, joining us right here in our studio. And of course, we talk with Zoe Tillman as well, joining us out there from our DC bureau.
So the Ibis Mojo was the first mountain bike I bought after college.
Was it?
Yeah, it was just a great bike. I rode it into the ground.
How did you find out about it? Or is it just because you're in this world?
Yeah, I mean, I was living in the mountains of Colorado at the time, and the way that the bike industry works is certain brands have certain dealers. So you find the shop that carries the bikes that you want. You go and try the different bikes. And I tried this bike and I fell in love with it. And since then, I followed the brand pretty closely. The Haka is a gravel bike that they make that I've ridden in the last couple of years. That's a great bike too.
I love to hear this story. And I also think about all of those smaller companies. Like we talk so much about how small business, right, are so important to U.S. economic growth, right? We talk about,
barely in the green. It's a good hour, right? Good hour show.
Yeah. I loved it.
Okay, some good show.
I'll stick around.
NASDAQ fell today by 0.4%. The Dow was up by about 0.6%.
I'm Carol Massar, along with Tim Stanovic. Let's get to some stocks on the move today. We're joined by Bloomberg News earnings specialist Rachel Pua. She is here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. All right, stocks on the move. What's your first stock?
Yeah, so I think this is the one that's been talked about quite a bit. But Lockheed Martin is, it's one of the companies that has had quite a pretty tumultuous week. But the shares are kind of up today. This is because we saw that Trump said on Truth Social that he wants to raise the U.S. defense budget to $1.5 trillion, which is almost 1.5 times this year's budget. Other defense companies are also kind of seeing a similar trajectory with their shares. Just yesterday, their stocks also tumbled when Trump said that he wanted to stop them from issuing dividends and doing buybacks. So it's been quite a week for these
quite a 24 hours for these companies.
The week's not over, Rachel. A lot can happen tomorrow.
Tough to be a defense company in the last 24 hours. Yeah. Or is it?
I don't know.
You
know what's funny is that a $5 million, that would be the limit for the executive pay, is what it was talked about.
Did you look at like CEO compensation?
It exceeds in a lot of cases, and I'm not talking about just the defense companies specifically, but publicly traded CEO salaries in general are pretty high.
So what do you think?
I think a lot of people would say.
Do you think he meant salary? Do you think he meant options?
Do
you think he meant the whole?
Did he mean total compensation?
Kit and caboodle?
Who is this? The IRS asking?
Right, the devil in the details. Right? No, we talk about income versus. Rachel, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Rachel Pua, she is Bloomberg News earnings specialist joining us here in studio. That's going to do it for us on this Friday's Eve.
If you want more conversations like this, check out our new Stock Movers podcast. You can subscribe for 5-minute episodes on the biggest winners and losers.
if we can get a dozen or 2 dozen, and that will give some momentum in the Senate for these bipartisan talks. My colleague Caitlin Riley and I are tracking these bipartisan closed-door talks on a possible compromise. This is a 3-year extension. It could be a 2-year extension with some anti-fraud controls, some health savings accounts. We talked to Brian Fitzpatrick, one of the leading members who's negotiating this. He's very optimistic they can release a bill early next week. So that's where there could be a solution. It's still an uphill battle, but there is a possibility.
So what's the point? If this is not the bill that becomes law, is this about generating some momentum, getting this back on the board, or is there more to it?
That's right. It's pressuring the Senate, putting a vehicle. The House has to start these revenue type bills, get it over in the Senate, say this is a live ball. Look, we got a lot of political pressure now, so we've got some momentum. But time is really running out. Members of the public who are Obamacare recipients, 20 million people have already been affected by this when it expired at the beginning of the year, and they would extend open enrollment possibly to March 1st. But already people are feeling this pain.
All right, this ought to be wrapped up pretty shortly here, Eric. I know you're watching it with us. Eric Wasson live on Capitol Hill. Let's check back in with Tyler Kendall in our Washington bureau. Tyler.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe. And we're going to take a look now at how the White House is watching all of these events that are unfolding on Capitol Hill tonight and bring in Bloomberg's Mario Parker for the latest. So, Mario, as Eric was just outlining, it is not clear if any of this legislation is going to get to President Trump's desk, and if it does, what it's going to look like. But how is healthcare becoming a potential political headwind for this White House?
No, absolutely. We want to get used to the term affordability for our viewers. You'll hear that throughout a lot of this year, and a lot of that is because Democrats feel like they won a political gambit late last year by putting health care front and center with the expiration of these ACA credits. And we see the White House on its back foot on this issue right now.
Is President Trump going to get more involved? Because perhaps surprisingly or not surprisingly, President Trump didn't really weigh into this battle during the government shutdown. He does talk a lot about this idea of giving more money to consumers instead of insurance companies, but is he going to have to get more involved in a tangible policy way?
He probably will, Tyler. That's a great point. I mean, for the better part of the last decade, the president has struggled with the ACA, Obamacare. He's by turns railed against it, said that he would have an alternative plan for it, and then also been burned by it, right? We remember the late John McCain changing his vote at the last second and really stubbing his finger, if you will, at the president. So it's a political hot button for the president. Again, it goes back to this affordability issue. The fact that we've seen ACA change so much politically over the last decade has also been disorienting for the president, right? At the start of his political career, it was Obamacare is bad. Now some of his own supporters depend on the very plan.
In the final minute I have you, another effort movement that we're watching on Capitol Hill is this War Powers resolution. We saw it advance in the Senate today. We're expecting a final vote next week. How is the White House reacting to all of this? Because this seems to be almost a parallel with Republicans, at least 5 today, going against this president.
Yes, absolutely. And we saw the president's Truth Social post nearly in real time, where he railed against those 5 Republican senators who broke ranks with him. One of which is namely is Susan Collins, who faces a re-election bid in one of the key swing states the Democrats want to pick up.
All right, so many things for us to keep our eyes on. Bloomberg's Mario Parker, thank you so much as always. And let's check back in with Joe Matthew, who's on Capitol Hill.
All right, Tyler, as the voting continues here, joining us now with his insights, a man who just voted, came off the House floor to sit down with us, Democratic Congressman Greg Stanton of Arizona, who serves on both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and House Transportation. It's great to see you. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio.
To be clear, I voted yes on today's bill.
Yes, I don't have to ask you that, and I was pretty sure that was the case. The question is, how many Republicans might cross the aisle with you, and what number do you need to reach some sort of critical mass that gets the attention of John Thune?
We've already got the attention of John Thune. Yeah. I thought he knows his members are right now working with Democratic members of the Senate on a deal. They need to get a deal done, and it'll send a strong message with the bipartisan support. Right before we started talking, we checked. I think it was up to 13 Republicans, but still many more to come. Yeah. So we're expecting 20 or more Republicans will join us on a bipartisan health care package that will reduce costs for the American people.
Well, that's fascinating. This is a clean extension for 3 years, I believe. The bill that you're talking about in the Senate comes with some strings attached. I think it's a 2-year extension, and there are some eligibility requirements, a cap on income. Is that something Democrats can warm up to if it means extending these subsidies?
Well, look, we're not going to negotiate on the air here,
course.
but we're reasonable people and we're willing to actually engage in negotiations.
So that's a
which
productive
should have happened months and months ago.
Well,
we were very clear that during the time of the shutdown, that we need to both end the shutdown and reduce healthcare costs for American people. The Republicans refused to have conversations with us. Now they're in the situation where the American people are receiving their premiums exactly what we said was going to happen. They're doubling, they're tripling. Millions of Americans will choose not to reaffirm their health care and go without health insurance because of it. It's an unacceptable situation, first and foremost, for people's health, for families. And secondarily, the Republicans know that it is politically unacceptable, that their inaction, their unwillingness to partner with us is what's causing this massive increase in healthcare costs.
Does this debate over healthcare grease the skids or make it more difficult for government funding to be completed in time for the deadline at the end of this month?
I mean, look,
people forget, but this is what caused the longest shutdown in history.
Yes, but look, it is time that we get back to regular order, which means actual bipartisanship, both on the issue of healthcare and on the issue of passing appropriation bills, which means compromise. And this president needs to understand, in order to get things through the United States Congress, you need bipartisan participation. He needs to get in the game and come here, bring his team here and start negotiation, not just with Republicans. And then, when they vote against him on something, taking away water projects like they did with Congresswoman Boebert, totally unacceptable. If you want to get things done, you have to work in a bipartisan way. There is no other way to operate in this community.
You mentioned that water project. This is an interesting moment up here where you've got Republicans looking to buck presidential vetoes. You've got Republicans crossing the aisle on a war powers vote next door in the Senate. Now you've got at least 13 Republicans who walked across the aisle to vote for this discharge petition to extend Obamacare subsidies. Has Donald Trump found the line on Capitol Hill?
I think about time. Where have you been? It's okay to express your own actual opinion. You are elected by the people in your community. You're not elected by Donald Trump. And if you disagree with him, and I know many of them disagree with him on issue after issue, it's okay. You're in Congress. You're elected by the people in your community. You need to express that, and it's okay to vote against the president of the United States.
There was a time when he said he wanted to make a deal and suggested that he would make a deal on healthcare subsidies with Democrats. That evolved into give the money directly to the people and they can go work it out with the insurance companies. What happened in the middle of that? Do you hear any conversation from the White House that suggests the president still wants to make a deal?
Well, look, you may have these concepts of a plan that you're still working out. Right now, the issue, if you want to lower healthcare costs for American people right now, the deal on the table is providing tax credits so people can better afford the Affordable Care Act. That is the approach right now, not some conceptual idea, but if you want to get something done for the American people to lower costs right now, they need to take the deal, support that. This is going to pass today. It's amazing that the Democrats are in the minority, but our plan is the one that's on the House floor now, and it's going to pass, because that's what lower costs to the American people.
You and I are looking at the House floor right now, Congressman. There you have it. You've got the votes. So this is as good as passed. And I realize some people can still change their votes at this point, but the math is clearly there. I don't know how many more Republicans, if any, now that this has passed, sign on to it. But is this about frontliners? Is this about Republicans in blue states, or is this something bigger? What are you hearing behind the scenes when we don't have cameras and microphones around?
I know you're addressing sort of the political dilemma that they have. Obviously, the momentum is on the Democratic side to win the majority in this upcoming election. But I got an idea. Just do what's right for the American people. The American people are clamoring for lower costs. They know that these tariffs are increasing costs on virtually everything that they buy. And they know that the Affordable Care Act tax credits help to make healthcare affordable for the American people. I know a lot of the Republicans over many years have attacked Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. Okay. Long term, you want to have discussions about some of the things you talked about, some of the ideas that they have. We'll enter the conversations. But right now, the policy on the table is what the Democrats are proposing, a 3-year extension.
This is all today happening against the backdrop of another terrible tragedy that has created a new conversation about political violence in this country. When you look at what happened in Minneapolis and the shooting death of this woman by an ICE agent, the investigation has barely begun, Congressman. And everyone seems to think they know, based on their political affiliation, what happened. The doom scroll this morning was like a Rorschach test. You could tell whether this was a Trump supporter or a Democrat weighing in on the outcome here. This is 15 years to the day that Gabby Giffords was shot in your state of Arizona. And I know that hits very closely to home for you. 15 years later, this has become a more difficult, not an easier conversation in this country. How do we get around it when it's that predictable? You go on social media and people think they already know what happened.
Well, in the case of ICE, look, the President of the United States campaigned on getting immigrants that are here that have violated our laws and are violent to be deported. He had bipartisan support on that. Democrats and Republicans agree that if you are in this country in an undocumented way and you've committed violent crimes, you have to go. But what he's doing is very different. It is mass deportation, and they're hiring thousands and thousands of new ICE officers so quickly that they're not getting the proper training. I was a mayor of a big city. The police department in Phoenix received incredible amount of training about how to deal with very difficult situations, potentially dangerous situations, interacting with the public in high pressure situations. Yeah. They're hiring these ICE officers so quickly. I am confident that they're not getting the type of training to help them actually deal with de-escalation, which this situation, from what I saw, should have been handled in a de-escalatory way. Instead, it ended up with a young woman, a 37-year-old mother, dying. We need to really look at these hiring practices and the lack of training. We can make the situation much safer, and we need to again focus in on violent criminals, not on mass deportation. The American people are saying that's not what we want.
Well, I hope we can de-escalate the political fallout as well, Congressman.
That's probably a good point, too.
Good to spend some time with you. Democratic Congressman Greg Stanton of Arizona, fresh off the floor of the House. He's a yes. Tyler, let's get back to you in the Washington Bureau.
Great conversation, Joe. And I mean, the congressman telling Joe right there that Democrats feel that they have the attention of Senate Majority Leader John Thune, because our conversation is about to turn to that, as it appears that this vote in the House has the votes needed to pass that threshold. Coming up, we're going to bring you what's next and all the unfolding breaking news on Capitol Hill, continuing our conversation and special coverage with Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania, Republican Congressman Nick LaLota of New York. That's up ahead. Keep with us. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Thanks for joining us. I'm Joe Matthew, live on Capitol Hill with Tyler Kendall in our Washington bureau. And breaking news here from the Capitol, where the U.S. House of Representatives has just passed the discharge petition to extend or revive Obamacare subsidies. These are the extended COVID-era subsidies in a clean 3-year extension. The final count, 17 Republicans crossing the aisle in favor. Joining us now live on Capitol Hill, one of the Republican yes votes, Congressman Nick LaLota of New York, who serves on both the House Appropriations Committee and the House Small Business Committee. From The View from Long Island, it's great to see you on Bloomberg TV and radio. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
I know you ran up from the House floor, and we appreciate that a lot. You're a yes vote, which is not a surprise because you're one of the Republicans who helped to unlock this discharge petition. And you've already been talking with some of your colleagues in the upper chamber. Now that this has happened, where does it go?
Yeah, so we wanted to give some wind in the sails of our colleagues in the Senate who are eager to do something on this issue. The Republicans who voted in favor of this just a few moments ago here in Washington know a few things. We know that there are cracks in the foundation of the Affordable Care Act. We know that 1 in 3 claims are denied. We know that premiums have risen 60% more than inflation since its inception. And we know that the insurance companies are making a gazillion dollars. Nevertheless, a lot of our constituents rely on these subsidies. And doing nothing, we knew, was not an option. So we wanted to, and we explored several different options before Christmas. Unfortunately, a number of them were blocked by our Rules Committee. And this was the only option available to us, was to pass this 3-year extension, which we understand is dead in arrival in the Senate. But we expect the Senate to instead use this as an impetus to have probably a 2-year extension with some income caps and some fraud protections and some other reforms that Obamacare desperately needs.
Okay, so this is interesting because this is, I guess, a little bit of how the sausage is made, right? This bill is not likely to become law, but there is a companion bill, if we can call it that, in the Senate that looks a bit different, a 2-year extension with some eligibility requirements, minimum income requirements, maximum cutoff. Is that something that Democrats will be able to talk to Republicans about and codify into a final bill?
I think so. I think especially in the Problem Solvers Caucus, there's a large understanding that there needs to be some compromise. Democrats are quite keen on just extending the credits, and Republicans are quite clean on having some reforms, revisions, especially related to fraud. The Senate bill that's coming to fruition soon will probably have a hybrid mix of both, which will enable it likely and hopefully to get the 60 votes in the Senate. And it comes back to the House and will likely get the 218. That's the best path for both the short and long term of the Affordable Care Act.
So as a Republican here, and you hear what the president's rhetoric is, forget Obamacare, scrap it and give the money directly to people. There's been a real allergy to extending some of these subsidies for many, if not most, members of your Republican House conference. So do you feel like you're on an island or a trailblazer on this issue?
No, I heard differently from the president when he was with the House Republican Conference on Monday.
Pressure is killing me. Hey, there's no peer pressure here. Let me put it to you this way, and I mean this. Tomorrow, go to the website. This will be $59.99. Tomorrow, tonight, $39.99. WildWestDeals.com, $39.99 tonight only. Period. Let me put it to you this way, folks, and I can't put this any clearer than what I'm going to put right now. I can't put it any clearer. If you don't buy this, if you do not buy this at $39.99, you're going to wake up in the morning and not be able to buy it for $39.99. You're going to look in the mirror, and you know what you're going to see? A loser. You're going to see something that you don't ever want to see. You're going to be a disappointment to yourself. You're going to look in that mirror and you're going to go, what was I thinking? All I had to do was go to wildwestdeals.com and pull the trigger. $39.99. What's wrong with me? Why am I a loser? Why am I worth nothing? Because you didn't buy this for $39.99. You buy this for $39.99, guess what, folks? You take the L away. You put a W there, baby. You're a winner, man. You're the real deal. You're picking up chicks. Let me tell you something. You buy this set at $39.99, baby, you're the cock of the walk, man. You walk into the bar and you just find the hottest chick and you go, you, me. Guess what? She says, why would I go out with you? Because I bought the deal on Wild West Deals for $39.99. That's why. She says, can I go home with you? That's how simple it is. That's how it works. That's what this set brings to the table. Because you know what she sees? She sees a man who knows what he wants. She sees a man who says, good deals don't get by me, baby. I move. I act. I act quick. I act now. I go to wildwestdeals.com. Boom. That's why you're hanging with chicks all night long. That's why you got guys like Michael Jordan calling you, wanting to hang out with you, baby, because you bought it for $39.99. Is that crazy? That's the way it works around here. This deal will change your life. Don't look at yourself in the mirror and be disgusted tomorrow. Don't look at yourself in the mirror and go, what's wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Why am I this way? No. Tomorrow morning, when you see this thing for $59.99 and you bought it for $39, you look in the mirror and you go, who's the daddy? I'm the daddy. Because I got the best freaking 15-set deal in the history of the internet. Right here, right now, tonight. Woo! My buddy Ric Flair would say, woo! Baby, that's beautiful. Is that beautiful, guys? Do we have B-roll on this so I can get the next one set up? I tell you what, gang.
The most powerful country in the world. That is not changing, but its reliability in terms of what it stands for, its political priorities, again, at home and around the world, is changing dramatically. And that is putting a lot of other countries, both adversaries and friends of the United States, on notice.
What have we learned in 2025 about what the U.S. administration wants to do, and what does that mean for the new global order?
Well, it's changing. In 2025, at the beginning of the year, and you and I have spoken through it, we were talking a lot about tariffs. We're talking a lot about the United States weaponizing market access in the U.S. To get more of what it wants from other countries around the world. That was a really big deal on Liberation Day. It is much less so in 2026 for lots of reasons. You've got the Supreme Court ruling on IEEPA coming down shortly, which is likely to constrain the president's ability to tariff. You have affordability issues that are really problematic for Trump at home with midterm elections coming up. And you have the Chinese showing that they are willing and capable to hit Trump in the face, giving back as much as they've gotten, that Trump has to back down on. But as Trump moves away from using the tariff as the principal tool of American economic power globally, he is moving towards military force, where the U.S. is more unilaterally powerful. He is embracing the so-called Donroe Doctrine, which I'm sure you want to talk about. And that is an area that it's a lot harder for countries to force Trump to taco. It's much more, as they say recently, FAFO, fool around and find out.
What does Venezuela teach us about what Vladimir Putin should be thinking? What does it mean for China? And what does it mean for Greenland?
It means a lot more for allies than it means for adversaries. For adversaries, the Russians did not need the United States to invade Venezuela to make them understand that they don't like the existing international order and they want it to be more of the law of the jungle. Russia's problem is they can't execute on that. If Russia had the military capacity to pull off anything close to what the United States did over the last weekend in Venezuela, you and I would be having a very different conversation about the state of Europe right now. Right? That it'd be a radical problem for the frontline Europeans, and more than that. But they couldn't do it, and that's the issue. The fact is that they may be stronger than the Ukrainians in taking territory there, but they're weaker than lots of other folks. And globally, the Russians are losing influence. At the end of the day, it's not like Trump was asking the Russians if they were going to do anything in response to the Americans hitting their ally, Venezuela. China, too. You know, there was a China delegation in Caracas that had just met with Maduro the day before, a high-level delegation. Trump didn't give them any notice that the bombs were coming in. And the Chinese public response was that they were shocked. Well, of course they were shocked, because the Americans don't care about how the Chinese feel about what happens in America's backyard. Now, the Chinese, of course, feel the same way about their backyard. Again, it's a question of how capable they are to impose those outcomes. What's stopping them from taking Taiwan, which they consider to be a matter of domestic policy, has been how well defended Taiwan is and whether or not Taiwan will continue to be well defended if America does or doesn't care about it.
But if you're Vladimir Putin now, would you not feel threatened after what happened to Nicolas Maduro?
You know, Putin has played with Trump toe-to-toe for a year now, and he has given Trump absolutely no quarter on a ceasefire. And he has seen that the response from the United States is that they're going to press Ukraine a lot harder than Russia. Why? Because Ukraine is a lot weaker. They're much more likely to capitulate. And Trump doesn't care about the conditions of a ceasefire. He just wants it to happen, and he wants credit for it. So if you're Putin, I think you feel like this is a time of maximum vulnerability for the transatlantic alliance, maximum vulnerability for the frontline European states. And what you learned from Venezuela, yes, you lost access to an erstwhile ally that you couldn't support in the Western Hemisphere, just as you did when Bashar Assad was toppled, just as you did when the Americans engaged and supported Israel in a 12-day war in Iran. But the much bigger statement is what the Americans are right now saying about Greenland. That feels very strategically attractive for the Russians. They've never heard such good news from U.S. on the foreign.
Were to happen. And is this really part of the Donroe Doctrine, or is this just trying to negotiate like a real estater and see what happens?
It is. Overtly and covertly, and they'll use both carrot and stick. And so, look, if there were a military invasion, yes, it would be the end of NATO. Just like if the Russians were to send tanks into Poland, it would actually lead to a war between NATO and Russia. But of course, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the United States deploying a whole bunch of tools, overt and covert, that are much less than sending finally starting to. In the last 48 hours, you have seen statements from the Danish prime minister, collectively supported by all of the Nordic leaders and many of the Europeans as well, that makes it clear that NATO will be over if there is an effort to directly take Greenland, not defined very clearly, but that's a start. They weren't saying that publicly a week ago. Look, what the issue is that right now there is a spectrum. There's a spectrum between weak countries where the Trump operational doctrine is FAFO, F around and find out, and powerful countries where the Trump operational doctrine is TACO, Trump always chickens out. Xi Jinping and China are in the TACO camp. Venezuela and Maduro are, they found out, in the FAFO camp. And right now, the Americans consider the Europeans to be solidly FAFO. So they need to be credible. They need to be able to show Trump that there will be consequences that matter for Trump personally. Now, in the biggest European countries, including outside the EU, the government of Germany, the government of France, the government of the UK, these are weak, vulnerable governments, and they're going to have a really hard time responding to what Trump is serving up. Trump is aware of that, and he has a great nose for weakness and vulnerability. It's how he became a billionaire. It's also how he became president.
Pet stores are trying to ban this $39 robot puppy because kids actually prefer it.
How do you view, when you look at the risks in 2026, your top 10 risks, where does AI sit?
AI fits in two different places. First, AI fits in the US-China race. US-China conflict is not a risk this year, precisely because of the TACO camp that I mentioned and Beijing willing to stand up to Trump. But you know that the Americans are now saying they're willing to provide these H200 chips from NVIDIA to the Chinese, a critical choke point. Trump's looking forward to making his trip to meet with Xi Jinping in April. He's talking about a G2, providing that, sort of peer respectability for the Chinese that he's not giving to anybody else, friend or foe. Now, in that environment, the fact that the Chinese are investing, and as no one else is, in powering AI, in becoming an electro state, in an electric stack that is the 21st century energy infrastructure that will power AI, while the Americans are trying to take Venezuela. The Americans are producing 13.5 million barrels of oil a day. There's nothing wrong with having lots of oil and gas and coal, but those energies are not becoming less expensive at scale. They're 20th century technologies. 21st century technology, the Americans are ceding to the Chinese. So on AI, the Chinese are fast following the Americans on large language models, but they're well ahead of the Americans in creating the technologies that will power AI, both in China and exporting them to other countries around the world. And the Donroe Doctrine sounds great in terms of military control of the United States in its backyard. Trump can accomplish that, but China is the dominant economic power for most of these countries, and they're developing the electricity stack and the AI capabilities that these countries are going to want to use. So ultimately, the Chinese are in a better position to have more influence around the world, even in America's backyard, because of those investments. That's enormously important and not getting enough attention.
And is this despite actually some concrete Chinese concerns over deflation, actually the economic cycle domestically?
Yes, and deflation in China now in its 10th straight quarter is a risk on the report, but it's number 7, so less impact globally. And what that means is that China understands the problem. They are kicking it down the road. There's no bazooka for consumer stimulus coming soon, which means they're exporting the problem. And it does weaken China's influence internationally, cutting against the investments on the strategic side that I just mentioned. Why? Because of that $1 trillion export surplus they had in 2025, which is only going up in 2026. The part of the Chinese economy that is most performing is the manufacturing sector, mostly for export, leading to involution inside China and causing beggar thy neighbor problems with all the countries that are receiving these essentially dumped, inexpensive Chinese goods.
I mean, at number 10, you have the water weapon, which I think is the first time that you have in top risks. What does that look like?
Yeah, it's probably going to only go up over time. You've got 2 billion of the 8 billion on the planet who are experiencing water stress for at least 1 month out of the year. And around the world, increasingly, it's becoming weaponized in ways that are affecting and worsening local conflicts. U.S. and Mexico, Horn of Africa, the Sahel with radicalization as a consequence, India, Pakistan too. So we'll be talking more about that.
At West Coast Family Dental, the health and comfort of our Port Alberni patients is our first priority.
You've been very, very transparent about where you are on the dot plot and what your forecast.
With us today on Capitol Hill. That's Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean of Pennsylvania. We thank you for the insights. Another story that we've been tracking is the scene today playing out in Minneapolis after protesters gathered for a vigil for the 37-year-old citizen Renee Nicole Good, who was shot, killed by an ICE officer during a confrontation, with both the president now and Vice President J.D. Vance accusing the woman of running over the ICE officer. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt doubling down on the administration's position during a news conference earlier today. Let's listen.
The deadly incident that took place in Minnesota yesterday occurred as a result of a larger, sinister, left-wing movement that has spread across our country, where our brave men and women of federal law enforcement are under organized attack.
Joining us now for more, Bloomberg's Miles Miller, who's been all over this story. And Miles, as you report on national security for us here at Bloomberg, I'm wondering your thoughts or whatever you can report on the investigation. Here in Washington, everyone seems to have decided what happened already.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I asked the secretary, she was in New York today, whether she agreed with the initial assessment by Tom Homan, who said, let the investigation play out. And then he eventually came to that this was justified. Yeah, as you mentioned, there is an FBI investigation into what happened here, but the minds have been made up in the Trump administration. They believe this officer was justified. The secretary said that the woman who was shot and killed had been stalking and harassing these officers all day, blocking them with their vehicle. But, in covering federal law enforcement for quite some time, they judge all of these incidents by what's called the reasonable officer standard.
So
would a reasonable officer be able to know that they were going to be in fear for their lives? And that's exactly what they'll be judging this by.
All right, Bloomberg's Miles Miller, thank you so much for all of your reporting. And coming up, we'll continue our coverage of the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies vote when we assemble our political panel. Plus, we're going to speak to one of the Republican lawmakers who crossed the aisle and voted in favor of the extension. That's Congressman Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania. Keep with us. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
It's Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew, live on Capitol Hill alongside Tyler Kendall in our Washington bureau. With breaking news this evening, the bill passed along with 17 Republicans voting yes and all Democrats. Not a huge shock on that side of the aisle to revive Obamacare subsidies that expired at the end of last year. And I'm here with one of the Republicans who helped to make this happen to begin with, forcing this vote to the floor, Republican Congressman Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania, who serves on both the House Foreign Affairs Committee and House Homeland Security. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thanks for being with us on Bloomberg TV and radio. 17 Republicans today. It was a much smaller number, though, when you signed on to the discharge petition. And I wonder if you can explain the psychology here and what led you to that point, because you were one of the first Republicans to stick your head up to vote yes.
Absolutely. So since running for office in 2024 on the campaign trail, the biggest issue that we heard about was affordability and cost of living issues. And so that has not changed. After 4 years of Bidenflation, people were suffering. And I say it's the 2 F's and 2 H's, food and fuel, housing and healthcare. Those are what make up the bulk of people's household incomes. And they've been struggling to make ends meet. And so in this category of healthcare, the extension of the tax credits is something that could provide some affordability, some relief for millions of Americans. And so when the issue came up, it was something that I was supportive of right from the get-go.
Was your phone ringing off the hook? What was constituent services going through leading up to the shutdown and through that period of time that made you feel this way?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important in a district like ours to be responsive to constituents.
Yeah.
So we heard from some people that utilize these. I have often given the example of a restaurateur, a small business owner in our district. He said that his premium was going to go from $391 a month up to over $900 a month.
Wow.
And he said it's simply not sustainable for him and his family. And so what he was choosing to do at that time was to de-enroll in his health insurance, hoping that Congress would come back and take some kind of action, provide some kind of relief or a new way for him to re-enroll in a new program.
Yeah.
And then he would actually be able to get health care. And so ultimately, though, that leaves him in a position where he is going to have no health insurance for his family, putting them in a very vulnerable and precarious situation,
That's
not
dangerous.
where we want people to be.
Well, there are a lot of dangerous stories like these, and I wonder if you have a sense or if we can even quantify the damage done in terms of people who said, you know what, forget it. At the end of last year, I'm just not going to enroll, because there'll have to be a big communications or messaging campaign to get them back on board if this happens, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard to judge because there are a lot of different moving pieces in a market like this and different considerations that people have. So it could be that they were on a program like this with the extended tax credits, but now they've moved into an employer-sponsored health plan. At the same time, we saw healthy and robust enrollments in Pennsylvania. So what we would like to do, though, if there is going to be a bipartisan solution that comes out of the Senate, we want to make sure that there is an extension of the enrollment period so that anybody who maybe like this individual who did de-enroll, if they want to get back into a plan that has an extension.
What's a reasonable window? Middle of March?
Yeah, I think middle of March is what people have talked about, and I think that is a reasonable plan.
So when you look at the bill that's making its way through the Senate, 2-year extension, eligibility requirements, I think 700% of the poverty level is the cutoff. Is that reasonable as well?
It is. And so what we have talked about in the House is we've had 2 bipartisan proposals that I've been a part of that we have put forward months ago, saying that these are the general parameters. We want to get rid of those $0 premium plans because of the potential for fraud. We want some kind of income caps. We would like to see also some potential for reforms, like cracking down on PBMs, so you could bring down the cost of health care.
That's a bipartisan
in the long term
issue.
It is bipartisan. All of these things had bipartisan support. We rolled out those 2 packages, but unfortunately, what we saw in the House was our team didn't have the requisite members willing to support it to get it actually a vote on the floor. Much further along in this discussion. We could have avoided the lapse at the end of December. We could have had one of those bipartisan solutions get over to the Senate. What you're seeing now is, unfortunately, the lapse has occurred. Our efforts in the House are keeping this conversation alive. And what is going on in the Senate is they are looking at plans very similar to what we had already proposed here in the House. And so hopefully we'll get to one of those resolutions.
What's the conversation when you're in the cloakroom and I'm not around with a microphone and a camera here? Is it, hey, you're making this hard on me, what are you doing to our party? Or is it, thanks for giving me cover here in voting for this?
I think there are certainly some people that are just totally opposed and they're not going to change. And that's their own right, and they represent their districts. At the same time, what I've been pleasantly surprised with is some people in our party that were initially opposed. They've been willing to have reasonable conversations with me. I explain what's going on in my district at home, why this is so important to us, and give the example like I did about the restaurateur. And it's not just him, but it's other small business owners, realtors, other individuals that used to be in what we considered association health plans, and they were able to get their health care through an association, whether it's a Chamber of Commerce or Realtors Association or otherwise. They've now been pushed to that Obamacare market. They've seen these increased premiums over the years, and so they're looking for relief. And so when I give that explanation to my fellow colleagues, some of them will come around and actually say, hey, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Don't disagree with you. And they say we're open to seeing what comes out of the Senate.
And that's how you get to 17 Republicans today. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
The number has been increasing, and so we're gonna continue to work in a bipartisan way, and hopefully we'll get more support. And if something does come back from the Senate, I think that number of 17 is actually going to grow much further.
Really interesting. Been looking forward to this conversation. There may not be a state more important than Pennsylvania on the electoral map, and that's why Ryan McKenzie, the Republican from Pennsylvania, is so important in this conversation. We're glad you could be with us on Bloomberg. Congressman, thank you so much. Let's check back in with Tyler in our Washington bureau. Tyler.
Thanks so much, Joe. And we're going to extend this exact conversation right now with their reaction to everything unfolding on the Hill. And that's our political panel tonight. Roger Fisk, Democratic strategist and former aide to President Obama, alongside Republican strategist Sarah Chamberlain, president and CEO of the Republican Main Street Partnership. Sarah, let's start with you because we like to say that your crystal ball is normally right. So if we're taking what's happening in the House, what are the palatable changes that the Senate is going to make that then kicks it back to the House? And will this ultimately pass the House and make it to the president's desk?
Well, there's very little I can add that Ryan, who's a member of Republican Main Street Partnership, just spoke about. But we're hoping for some help on finding fraud, doing away with fraud. I mean, that's a huge issue in ACA or Obamacare. So we're hoping the Senate will make some tweaks there. I think if they do, you will see more than 17 members, all 17 members who did it, Republican Main Street Partnership members. I think there's probably another 20 or so that are out there looking for a few changes on the Senate side to bring it back. But that's a big one. We have a lot of fraud in ACA, and it has to be tackled.
So, Roger, today Democrats are billing this as a win. We heard from Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. They say healthcare is not going to play into a potential government shutdown. I'm wondering, though, is this really a win? Because ultimately the bill as it stands in the House isn't going to become law. And we are talking about an extension. We're not talking about new policy. And we repeatedly hear from voters that they want more of a focus on affordability and bringing down costs across the board.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Wonderful to be here with Sarah. I don't know if it's a win in and of itself, but it's part of a win, and it's progress. The most fascinating thing for me is not only the inherent tensions between the House and the Senate, but the 3-year model of the House punts this entire dynamic after the next presidential campaign. Whereas if the Senate gets their way and it's 2 years, that puts it right in the spring of 2028. So then that will change the whole tone and flavor of how all the candidates have to orient themselves around this issue. I think what we're going to see in the Senate is probably some kind of sliding scale. So 700% of the poverty level in the first year, 500% in the second year, some kind of out-of-pocket copay or something like that where there's a little bit more of a burden or an expectation on behalf of the individual. And then the real fun starts in conference when you take a 2-year model from the Senate and the 3-year model from the House. And then underlying all of that is some of the cultural issues, some of the restrictions on abortion services and things like that. So this is progress, but there's much, much more work ahead.
So if it comes back and the abortion, the Hyde Amendment is stricter, you will lose votes on the Republican side in the House. They do not want to see that. They do not want to revisit the whole abortion issue here.
I agree.
I wanted to ask you about that, Sarah, because that's a pretty big deal. And I asked a couple of members about that this evening, the impact of the Hyde Amendment. This is pretty difficult stuff, and it's very personal for a lot of lawmakers. To what extent then, and which Republicans are we talking about when you mention that? Could that limit Republicans' ability to cross the aisle and vote for this with a straight face?
It absolutely could. If they make the Hyde Amendment stricter, you will lose some of the Republican Main Street Partnership members, maybe not all 17 of them that voted for today, but you certainly won't be adding any more to it. There's a lot of swing districts. All of these members today are pretty much still in swing districts. They do not want this issue brought up again. I mean, it hurt us last time it was brought up.
Of that.
That's a fascinating question. I think that he would be thrilled that the legislation still exists. But I also think, to Sarah's point, that it's something that every public policy requires scrutiny. And every public policy requires reform as it moves forward. There's no such thing, and there never has been, of a piece of policy or legislation that's impervious to change, and that can be technological change or any number of other things. So what I think on the Democratic side they need to do is take back the mantle of reform and double down on the idea that they're the responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And I know that that is kind of a point of contention back and forth, because at any given point in an electoral cycle, one party can be looked upon as more responsible than the other. But the Democrats have a history of reform, and they should actually invite scrutiny on the policies that they endorse, because ultimately that's healthy, and that proves that they're responsible stewards to the American taxpayer.
Sarah, just 30 seconds. Are Republicans going to take the mantle of reform here?
We're trying to. I mean, we really need to reform ACA, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. But there's a lot of issues within it. And I don't think the Democrats would disagree with me on that.
All right. A great conversation tonight. Roger Fisk and Sarah Chamberlain, our political panel. Thank you both, as always. To learn more about all of these stories and more, make sure to check out the Washington Edition newsletter on the terminal and online.
Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power, live from Capitol Hill. I'm Joe Matthew. Of course, that's Tyler Kendall in our bureau, and we'll meet you back here for the Friday edition, only on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This has not been a great time for genius. The people who claim to have it do not seem to qualify for it. The people who diagnose it, others seem to have a very, very narrow definition in mind. And the people we can all agree are stone cold geniuses always seem to have a dark side. I read in Bloomberg Businessweek about the biggest crypto genius of them all, Sam Bankman-Fried. At his peak, he was worth like $26 billion. And that was before he was accused of running one of the biggest frauds in American history. His defense is that he is not a criminal, essentially, just inept. What does it mean to have genius in work, in the marketplace, in life? And who is even to say? To make anything simple takes actual genius, and we're going to try to live up to that name together tonight.
It's the Business Week Show.
Hello, I am Max Abelson, and I'm not a genius, just a regular, like slightly above average journalist who has spent about the last decade and a half here at Bloomberg News and sometimes our magazine, Bloomberg Businessweek, writing about Wall Street's money and power. And what that means is I write about ambition and ownership and imagination and survival and risk and second acts and, of course, genius. Tonight, and in the weeks to come, we are going to be talking about those things at this table with people whose lives and careers and ideas are big or interesting or just really fun. So, welcome. This is the Business Week Show, and it's starting right now. If you consider yourself a master of Wall Street, a connoisseur of investing, a soothsaying financial genius, a brilliant portfolio manager, our guest has very bad news for you. Burt Malkiel's book, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, 50 years ago, had a clear and vivid message, which was that Wall Street genius is really just an illusion, and that professionals in pinstripe suits at the end of the day are no better than naked animals. It was a genius and radical idea, because what he had to say is that you should forget them and just buy and hold clear, boring, basic, low-cost index funds. He is here to tell us about it. Burt Malkiel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Your book is actually, it's pretty funny. It's a little saucy sometimes, your book. I mean, you say no one in finance can really forecast the future, or at least they can't do it successfully, consistently. You know, I think you use the word genius in quotation marks, and you give it to Ponzi schemers and whatnot. Right now, are there any actual individual geniuses on Wall Street? You know, real human geniuses, maybe AI is a genius we've been all waiting for. Can you identify any current geniuses on Wall Street right now?
Well, as you know, I put genius in quotes because I'm not sure there are geniuses in the market. And I've always said I would much rather be lucky than smart. Are there some hedge fund people who have, in fact, made a lot of money? George Soros bet against the British pound and made a lot of money. There were people who sold short in 2000 and made a lot of money. But I am not willing to say that they were geniuses. I want to say that they were lucky, because for every one of them, there was a hedge fund that in fact lost money. No, I don't think there are geniuses. I think there are a lot of very smart people in Wall Street, but it is not possible.
Maple drip, steel grip, stack that rent. EAC ain't here to repent. Polygon warlord, ice cold mine. Market collapse, I still grind. Maple drip, steel grip, stack that rent, EAC ain't here to repent. Polygon warlord, ice cold mind, market collapse, I still grind, root that fear, relocate, profit born in frozen race. Maple drip, steel grip, stack that rent, EAC ain't here to repent. Maple drip, steel grip, stack that rent, EAC ain't here to repent. Polygon warlord, ice cold mind, market collapse, I still grind, root that fear, relocate, profit born in frozen dead. No fake talk, I don't pretend, rent check burn, but the stream don't end. From born machine first serve, I don't serve weed, I make it serve. You go so tight, it'll cut your curve. Bring my weapon, I never swerve. Like a secret drip, pass it on Dolce floor. Touch all your puppets and market war. Thinking ain't alien, North front core. They show coin, then build what's more.
No mercy for fake charts. No sleep for paper hands.
Maple drip, steel grip, stack.
And, you know, it's kind of very interesting how you talk about AI. I recently had to give a presentation on the economic outlook. And I thought, you know, just for kicks, I will go to Chat GTP and I will ask, can you give me an outline of what I should say? And actually, Chat GTP gave me a wonderful answer. It was a one-sentence answer. I cannot predict the future.
It might not necessarily qualify as genius, but you're able to write about Wall Street with clarity, which is really unusual because Wall Street, and I suffer from this myself, you know, you speak to Wall Street executives and they absolutely fetishize complexity. Why does Wall Street like to make things sound so complicated? Is there something sinister or something that has to do with the ego?
Whether it's sinister, but this is a very highly paid profession. And someone like me who says, listen, don't listen to anybody. Just buy a simple index fund and keep on investing period after period. If I'm charging you 2% a year to manage your money, I want you to think you can't do it yourself. So sure, you've got a vested interest. This is a very highly paid profession. And these guys do very, very well. Is that sinister? You know, I don't know. You call it sinister, anything you want, but is there an incentive to make it seem like it's very complicated, that ordinary people can't do it themselves? I think that's absolutely right.
The honest truth is,
From the frost he came, profit in his veins, EAC. Maple drip, steel grip, stack that rent. EAC ain't here to repent. Polygon warlord, ice cold mind, market collapse, I still grind, rug that fear, reload faith, profit born in frozen rate, no fake talk, I don't pretend, rent check. Surrey coat so tight it'll cut your curve. You pay my weapon, I never swerve. Syrup drip acid on gold chain floor. 6 flies to your pump in the market war. EAC alien North front core. At your coin then, build once more. No mercy for fake charge, no sleep for paper hand. No mercy for fake charge, no sleep for paper hand. Maple drip, steel grip, stack that rent. EAC ain't here to repent. Polygon warlord, ice cold mind, market collapse, I still grind, rug that fear, reload faith, profit born in frozen rate, no fake talk, I don't pretend, rent check burn, but the stream don't end. One no code in my DNA, true chart cut deep like a battle blade, every dip another raid, I catch these ghosts while they fade, I stream still live through the pain I breathe, I build what the weak can't conceive, living from heaven, hell receive, maple blood flow, I don't bleed, I we. Polygon, prophet of the north, double kick Your rips are dripping, market ripping. I'm the source. Maple drip, steel grip, stack that red. EAC ain't here to repent. Polygon warlord, ice cold mind. Market collapse, I still grind. Rug that fear, reload faith. Profit born in frozen rates. No fake talk, I don't pretend. Rent check burn, but the stream don't end. Canadian code, digital gold, EAC. Ow. Canadian code, digital gold, EAC, out.
like there was this intergenerational contract of stewardship with the planet, but that humanity over time has mostly abandoned that intergenerational contract of stewardship and has forgotten about how interconnected things are.
Did that moment change the life you led and the work that you do?
Absolutely. So one of the people that I really look up to is Jane Goodall. I watched something about Jane where she said that she went to a meeting as a scientist and she left that meeting an activist. In very similar ways, I went to Anchorage kind of just this scientist, and I came back both a scientist and now this space environmentalist activist to really try to, I guess, really showcase how we need to protect orbital space.
If there's a kind of genius that means something to you, something that you would want to live up to, or something you'd want to recognize in yourself, what would that kind of genius like actually look like?
To me, the best kind of genius is simply allowing myself to let the universe go through me and, I guess, use me as some sort of vehicle for the work that I'm trying to do. And if I can keep myself kind of in the moment and in a place of compassion and empathy, then I think genius is just what comes through when you allow that to happen.
There's more garbage orbiting the Earth than there are working satellites. You now work not just to make sure that all that stuff is properly tracked, but to be an evangelist for